Okay, Bob's teacher yells at him in class when he starts to talk to his classmates during a lecture. Bob now is quiet when his teacher is in the classroom, but will talk when his teacher is outside of the classroom. Bob's teacher is a what? So a bit of a tricky question, okay? If you were able to identify the so-called trick, good for you. That's really good. That's a really good sign. For those who don't, okay, think carefully about what the question is asking. The question is asking about Bob's teacher, okay? Now, Bob's teacher is doing what? Bob's teacher is yelling at Bob, and now Bob is quiet. So the yelling functions as what? A punisher, because the yelling decreases Bob's behavior. Bob's teacher is what? Bob's teacher is a stimulus, okay? So this distinction is important when we're talking about behavior. Bob's teacher isn't the punisher. The yelling is the punisher. Bob's teacher now functions as an antecedent stimulus that when Bob sees his teacher, he is now quiet in the classroom due to the yelling, okay? So the yelling is the consequence. So that distinction is important. Always figure out what the question is asking you and answer that, okay? The yelling is the punisher. Bob's teacher is simply the stimulus, okay? It's not a reinforcer because the behavior decreased, and it's not a prompt, right? Because because Bob's teacher isn't a prompt, right? It's just the stimulus, okay? So do that question a couple of times if you don't understand where I'm coming from. Hopefully you do, okay? The most important takeaway here is to understand you want to answer what the question is asking you, which in this case is about what is Bob's teacher. You are walking with your client to the park. Your client looks up in the sky, points, and says, airplane. Your client's behavior represents which of the following verbal operants? Okay, what are verbal operants? Verbal operants are how we describe verbal behavior in ABA. As an RBT, you only need to know a few. These are the big four, okay? Man, tact, intraverbal, and echoic. So in this case, what did your client do? Well, your client looked up in the sky and labeled the airplane. Which of the verbal operants represents a label? Is it a mand? Well, a mand is a request. So if your client is asking for something, that's a mand, okay? A tact, tacting is labeling. So when you tact something, that's when you label something. What did your client do? They labeled the airplane. Therefore, what? They tacted the airplane, okay? So this verbal operant is a tact. Let's go through all our answer choices. Intraverbal is a response to a verbal stimulus. So this is like a conversation. If I say, what's your name, and you tell me your name, that's an intraverbal. And echoic is simply repeating back what someone said. So if I said point to green, and you say point to green, that is an echoic, okay? So very basic knowledge of verbal operants is needed. You just need to understand which each one of these are, okay? Tact is probably the simplest because it's just a label. When you label something, you are tacting something. All right, simple graphing question. How would you describe the trend of points 1, 2, and 3? Okay, remember, what do we say about trend, right? Trend is the direction the data points are going, right? Data points can go up, data points can go down, data points can go nowhere, okay? And that is our trend. So let's look at our data points 1, 2, and 3. Data point 1 is on 2, data point 2 is on 2, data point 3 is on 2. What direction is the data going? Is it increasing or decreasing? No, it's not doing anything, right? Therefore, what? It's no trend, okay? So again, visual analysis, very straightforward, especially on the RBT exam. They're not going to confuse you, okay? Just for the sake of practice, let's look at data point 4 to 5. On 4, we're at 5. On 5, we're at 8. 4 to 5, the trend is increasing, okay? But then what happens? The trend drops back down, right? It decreases again, and then it increases again. So if I were to ask you about the trend of points 4, 5, 6, and 7, okay, I would still say no trend, right? Because it's still unclear. It goes up, down, up again, okay? There's no real trend of that data. Trend needs to be consistent for it to be considered a trend. Therefore, Our question 1, 2, and 3, how would you describe the trend of points 1, 2, and 3? No trend. Part of your client's skill acquisition plan includes life skills training. Today, you ask your client to fold their towels. There are 10 towels total. After 2 minutes, your client starts folding the towels. He folds 5 towels, which takes him 4 minutes, and then takes a 1-minute break. He then folds the remaining 5 towels. What is the inter-response time in regards to folding towels? Okay, long question with a lot of numbers and a lot of potential questions they could ask you. Okay, what are we going to do? We're going to answer only the question they ask us. So are they asking us about duration, about rate, about latency or IRT, frequency? What are they asking us about? Well, they want to know the inter-response time. They want to know the IRT in regards to folding towels. What do we know about inter-response time? Inter-response time is the time in between 2 responses. So what are they asking? They want to know how much time passed in between the response of folding towels. Okay, so now that you know what the question is asking, all you have to do is go back into the question and find the answer. They're always going to give you enough information in the question to answer the question. Okay, so now we need to find the inter-response time, or the time in between folding towels. Where is that? We have 10 towels total. Okay, after 2 minutes, your client starts folding the towels. What does the 2 minutes stand for? The 2 minutes would be latency, right? Latency is from the instruction to the start of the response. Latency is 2 minutes, so we know that's not our IRT. He folds 5 towels, which would be frequency, which takes him 4 minutes, which would be duration, and then takes a 1-minute break before he starts folding again. Bingo, there's our IRT, right? He folds 5 towels, 1 minute passes, he folds another 5 towels. Our inter-response time, therefore, is 1 minute. It's a really good question because you could ask a variety of different things based on just what you're given in this question. It's a good reminder. We want to just answer what the question asks, no more, no less. You're trying to log into your Amazon account to make a purchase. You try 2 different passwords, but both times receive a message that your passwords are incorrect. On the 3rd try, you successfully enter your password correctly and can log into your account. What type of differential reinforcement best describes what is happening in this scenario? Okay, kind of a differential reinforcement question. I wanted to change it up again because usually when we're talking about differential reinforcement, we talk about specific client behaviors, but we're going to talk about your behavior today. Okay, this doesn't change. Remember, ABA is the study of human behavior, right? It is, we are ABA, we engage in ABA every day. Okay, and if you start applying ABA principles to your everyday life, this becomes a lot easier. Okay, so just try to do that here. What kind of differential reinforcement describes you entering passwords that are incorrect, not receiving reinforcement, and only when you enter the correct password do you receive reinforcement? So let's go through them. DRO. What is DRO? How do we test it? Well, we ask, are we being reinforced in the absence of a behavior? No, right? We are reinforced when we perform the desired response, which is the correct password. Okay, so we need to engage in the behavior to get reinforcement. Therefore, it can't be DRO. DRA. Is the replacement behavior possible? Is it possible to show the replacement behavior at the same time as the behavior on extinction? In other words, can you enter 2 passwords at the same time? Can you enter your correct one and incorrect one? No, okay? The incorrect passwords are the behaviors we're putting on extinction, we're trying to remove. The correct password is the behavior we're teaching. This is what we're differentially reinforcing, but those can occur at the same time. Therefore, it can't be DRA. That leaves us with what? DRI, differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. Entering different passwords, okay, is incompatible. I can't enter the correct password and the incorrect password at the same time. Therefore, this is a DRI, differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. Greg is bullied at recess. He tried telling the teachers, but they told him he should try and stand up for himself. Yesterday, Greg disrupted the class and was given detention during recess. Greg now disrupts the class on a regular basis. Detention acted as a what? Okay, so Disregarding the teachers not addressing the bullying, Greg is getting bullied and he needs to find a way out of it. The teachers aren't helping him. So what does Greg do? Greg disrupts the class and gets detention. Okay. Now, detention is typically thought of what? As a punisher. In this case, though, what is happening? Okay. When we ask about reinforcement and punishment, what are we looking at? How does the behavior change? That is the key. Okay. Greg disrupted the class. He was given detention. He now disrupts the class all the time. What did Greg's behavior do? Greg's behavior increased. Therefore, detention is what? A reinforcer. Okay. Now ask yourself, was a stimulus added or was a stimulus taken away? Well, detention was added. Therefore, it has to be what? Positive reinforcer. Okay. Don't get caught in the trap of looking at detention or timeout and thinking, oh, it has to be a punisher. Okay. It all depends on what the stimulus, all depends on what the consequence does to the behavior. In this case, detention simply increased Greg's behavior. Greg will now get out of recess by disrupting the class. Therefore, detention is a positive reinforcer. Your client loves to go to Target with you and their mom. When your client walks through the toy aisle, he will point at items and say, "Can we buy that?" This behavior represents which of the following verbal operants? Okay, so remember, we went over these earlier. What did we say was the request verbal operant? Okay, we know it's not attacked. What is attacked? Attacked is a label. We're not labeling anything. Okay, we're making a request. What is the request verbal operant? Is it B, manned? Yes, right? A manned is simply ask, a request, right? You're asking for something, okay? Your client asks for toys, they ask for water, they ask for cookies, okay? They're manding for items. You're going to hear manned all the time as an RBT, okay? Manned training is when we teach clients to make requests functionally, okay? In this case, the client is simply manding for toys, okay? It's not an interverbal because the client didn't respond to a verbal stimulus. And it's not a coic because the client is not imitating any sort of verbal stimulus. It is a manned. There are some drawbacks to discontinuous measurement. For example, whole interval recording tends to what behavior and partial interval recording tends to what behavior? Our answer choices are underestimate, overestimate. Okay, so we need to figure out this whole interval underestimate or overestimate and this partial interval underestimate or overestimate. So this is a serious drawback to discontinuous measurement. In addition to not capturing every instance of behavior, this type of measurement can actually provide the wrong information about behavior, okay? When we underestimate something, okay, we're saying there's less than there actually is. Overestimate, we're saying there more than there actually is. So if we think about this logically, whole interval recording, what are you doing? You're recording a response when the behavior occurs the entire time. Meaning, if I have a 20-second interval and that behavior occurs for 19 seconds, I'm not recording a behavior, okay? So I would come back and see no response, even though that behavior actually occurred for 19 seconds. Therefore, whole interval recording does what? It underestimates behavior. Partial interval recording, on the other hand, if we had a 20-second interval, okay, if that behavior happened for a single moment, 1 second, it would count as a full response, okay? Therefore, I'm overestimating, okay? So whole interval recording tends to underestimate behavior and partial interval recording tends to overestimate behavior, okay? Go through that a few times if you don't understand, right? This is a good way to break down whole interval and partial interval in a more technical and logical sense, okay? Tito's mom bakes the most delicious cookies in the world. Tito's mom establishes a contingency with Tito that says if Tito finishes all his homework, Tito can have some cookies. However, when Tito's mom isn't looking, Tito will sneak a cookie even if homework isn't completed. Tito getting a cookie in the situation is best described as what? Okay, so it's okay if you don't necessarily know the answer to this one. I find a lot of RBTs don't know this term, even though we use it, okay? So I want to just explain it very quickly. It's a very simple term, okay? But it'll help you think when you're in the field, okay, how to avoid the situation. So what is happening here? Tito's reinforcement is what? Cookies. The contingency is if You do your homework, you get reinforced. However, Tito is getting access to these cookies without doing his homework. He's not completing the contingency. Okay. When this happens, we consider that bootleg reinforcement. When you get access to a reinforcer without actually completing or earning the contingency, that's called bootleg reinforcement. Okay. So if you're supposed to earn 5 tokens for a break and you somehow get out of working after 3 tokens, you've earned bootleg reinforcement. Okay. Reinforcement that wasn't earned. Okay. It was given by mistake or obtained some other way other than completing the contingency. So I just feel like it's important to throw this in there because it is a term we use. And I think we've actually seen it on the exam before. Okay. So just be aware of it. It's not a difficult term. Okay. It's just something you want to know. Anthony is working on controlling the volume of his voice. When Anthony is inside a library, he will whisper. When Anthony is outside with his friends, Anthony will talk louder and sometimes yell. Anthony is able to do what between environments? Okay. Should be a pretty straightforward question, right? We have 2 behaviors, right? We have a whisper and then we have a yell. Anthony knows when he's in a library, he's whispering. He knows when he's in an outside environment, he can talk loud and yell. Okay. What is Anthony doing between the environments? Is he differentiating? Remember, differentiating is in regards to the behavior. Okay. So if we were talking about his voice volume, that would be differentiating. Okay. But we're talking about the environments. Is Anthony maintaining? No, we're not looking at any sort of maintenance here. Okay. We're just looking at Anthony's behavior in different environments. Same with generalized, right? We don't know where this stuff was taught. Okay. We don't have enough information to let us know he's generalizing anything. So that leaves us with discrimination, discriminating between 2 stimulus, right? Which one is the library, one is the outside. In each stimulus condition, a different behavior is evoked. Therefore, he is discriminating between these 2 stimulus, the inside and the outside. Okay, hope you enjoyed. If you do, please like and subscribe. Remember, check out our study materials, rbtexamreview.com. Send me a message with any questions. I'm happy to help. Keep working hard, keep studying hard. It's going to pay off. When you do pass, let us know. We can include you in a Sunday shout out. Other than that, I'll see you back here Friday. Keep studying hard and talk to you soon.